Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, January 28th, 2020, or 2020, as I'm still getting used to calling it. We're ready to roll with another show, despite the fact the country is just not ready for it. I guess, possibly, that could be the case. They're not ready to hear from John Bolton, or maybe they are. We'll see what the polling says, perhaps, although we'll probably catch up on that tomorrow, unless Greg can convince me to read one of his stories by sending it to me via Skype in the background. It's entirely possible. We're ready to roll. Daily Co's Radio is live now. I am informed reliably from Bill in Portland, Maine, and he says that I, Kagro X, David Waldman, have another great on-air contest lined up. I never have anything lined up. So if you believe that, I've got a manuscript to publish with you. Anyway, be the 50th caller, and you'll win a free head on a pike. How does he do it? It's a good question. I keep them frozen. That is the answer. And you can do the same at home as well. Yep, head on a pike day. The thread has been reissued in toned down terms. I don't remember which proxy it was that got sent out to do the dirty work. Maybe it was Mark Meadows. For some reason that rings a bell for me, but maybe just because I saw him being annoying on television yesterday. But the thread has been issued, now downgraded to there will be repercussions if you vote against the president in support of impeachment, or for that matter, in support of witnesses, if it stays the Republican conference's wish to oppose calling any witnesses at the trial. That arguably in flux, but also arguably we've been here before, and we know that they like to fake being in flux and then at the last minute snap back into line with the party's wishes, and that a lot of people like to do that. That's when we are talking about polling and presidential preference. People come home to the party in the last couple days as soon as the vote gets real. So I think once the vote is ready to be laid before them and the president and leadership make their wishes known, the idea of their bucking that decision is, it spikes a little bit before the vote actually gets to the floor and then will decline immediately prior to it. Arms get twisted, etc. I was noting yesterday on Twitter that one of the senators' favorite tactics for favorite methodologies for casting votes that they know are likely to get them in trouble with the leadership is not as easily available to them in the impeachment context. When you are planning on voting in a way it's going to separate you from the bulk of the caucus on an important vote that they're going to want to, kick your ass for doing, a lot of times the method is to absent yourself from the chamber during the main of the voting. Let them call your name in the roll call and not find you. And they'll come back around to you afterwards, later on. During a regular roll call vote, most people aren't there at all during the initial roll call. They have to keep going around and around. And then as they arrive on the floor, they walk up, declare themselves to the clerk. They're recognized by the clerk. They cast their vote. Well, what they'll usually do then is hang back for a while, and then towards the end of the normal period for voting, it fluctuates a lot more in the Senate than it does in the House. But you get a sense for when the voting is coming to an end, and then you appear on the floor at the last minute from a back entrance and raise your hand to the clerk, and they call your name, and you cast your controversial vote, and you turn around and you run. Just get the hell off the floor before anybody can grab you and strong-arm you into changing your vote. Absent yourself for as long as it takes for the clerk to finally notify the presiding officer that it's time to simply call the vote and say, are there any other senators wishing to vote or to change their vote? If not, the vote is, and then they announce it, and it's done. And if you can successfully run away, they can't force you back in there to be one of those senators wishing to change his vote. But in the impeachment context, according to the rules anyway, which don't matter, as you know, you are supposed to be rising. You're supposed to be A, in your seat at all times. And then B, when called upon by the clerk during the roll call, you are to stand at your desk and rise and give your vote and then sit right back down again. So you're not supposed to be able to make that late appearance or to be able to run away. And everybody is supposed to know where to find you, too. That's another problem for all this. They sometimes will come in from a from a back or side entrance so that it's not clear where the conference, if you're talking about Republicans, or caucus, if you're talking about Democrats, so that the whips can't find you all that easily and get to you before you cast your vote or grab you before you're able to make your escape. You can break those rules, of course. People have been breaking the rule. Well, Republicans, anyway, have been breaking the rules on impeachment decorum with regularity and with impunity. The chair, Chief Justice John Roberts, completely uninterested in inserting himself into internal Senate business like enforcing the rules, and unwilling to to put himself in the spotlight unless he has a script before him or reason to admonish Democrats as well. So don't look to him to enforce things. But I guess, you could absent yourself from your desk, pretend you're headed to the bathroom. People will look at you funny since there's a roll call underway, particularly if you are early in the alphabet. But no one will stop you, likely, although I guess it's possible. If they suspect that you're one of the people who are going to buck the party and you might be a critical vote, McConnell may grab you on your way out the door and just sort of ask casually where you're going, or there might even be whips posted at the door, or for that matter, Republican members of the House might find themselves at the doors and asking senators where they think they're going. But for the most part, if you tell them you're going to the bathroom, they are not going to tackle you. Go out and stay out. And then they'll miss you in the roll call. They'll go right by you eventually. They'll look for you at your desk. You're not there. They know they can circle around back to you later on with the question, are there any other senators present in the chamber who wish to vote or change their vote? At which point you can say, me? And I mean, if you raised your hand from the back of the room and the clerk saw you, and it's their job to see you, then I don't think the clerk is going to say, I can't call on him if he's not standing at his desk. You cast your vote and then you can turn around and run again. Again, you're supposed to be seated at your desk, but they're not going to do anything about that. I guess it's theoretically possible that the Chief Justice could say, hold on a second, where do you think you're going? You're supposed to stay at your desk. Come back here. Sergeant at Arms, go grab that guy and bring him back to his desk. But whether the Chief Justice would realize that he could do that or even want to be the person who did that, I have my doubts. So, anyway, ordinarily, it would be harder to escape, and so it might therefore be, you might expect, I don't know what, less favorable odds when you're trying to figure out whether you think one or another of either the usual suspects or someone from out of left, or as the case may be, right field, will cast a maverick vote. But the odds were never good, really, anyway. So keep it all in mind. There's been some speculation I saw yesterday. We didn't get to discuss it. Pardon me, the frog is really attacking, real extra hard this week for whatever reason. But as I was saying, discussion yesterday in the New York Times, I think, did we put it away in Pocket? I think so. And I think Armando also sent this on for further consideration. But was it Neil Katyal writing an opinion piece in the Times yesterday that on the question of what the Chief Justice can and can't do as presiding officer. I don't know how much attention they paid to what they think he would do. I think Neil Katyal could probably give a pretty decent, would ordinarily give a pretty decent analysis of the persona of the Chief Justice and what he's likely to try to get away with and what he can't. But an interesting discussion. I wouldn't put too much stock in it, but it is in the New York Times, and so you're supposed to take it seriously. John Roberts can call witnesses to Trump's trial. Will he? Subheader here says, Democratic House managers should ask the Chief Justice to issue subpoenas for John Bolton and others. To the question asked at in the headline, I say, will he? No. Should Democratic House managers ask him to, knowing that he won't? Yes. All right. Now I'll tell you who wrote it. Neil Katyal, Joshua Geltzer, and Mickey Edwards. Law professors, the first two at Georgetown. That's Katyal and Geltzer. Mickey Edwards, former Republican congressman from Oklahoma. His name used to come up quite a bit in discussions of not only impeachment when the target was George W. Bush and or Dick Cheney, but also on the question of filibuster reform. So he's an interesting, usual Republican suspect on this front. Here's the essay. An overwhelming number of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, believe the Senate should hear from relevant witnesses and obtain documents during President Trump's impeachment trial. You know all about this. Striking new revelations about the president's role in the Ukraine affair, as reported from an unpublished manuscript by John Bolton, underscore the need for his testimony and that of others. Yet Republican members of the Senate have signaled that they intend to uphold Mr. Trump's unprecedented decision to block all of this material. As we were hinting at earlier in the show, like 5 minutes ago. People are giving the signals that they're wavering on this. Whether they're really wavering or not, I do not know. It has spread somewhat beyond the usual suspects, but not necessarily in rock-solid, believable ways. I think Pat Toomey is out there floating like a one-for-one witness exchange sort of deal. I don't know whether there's any tactical advantage in agreeing to something like that or not. I guess if there's any real possibility that Pat Toomey might find himself under pressure to require at least the testimony of John Bolton, well then, let him writhe with it. And if he, doesn't rise to the occasion, then good, let him stew. I mean, there is that possibility. We should be able to hold out, I think, the possibility that Democrats are willing to say, we think that we could increase the pressure on people not to stand by the president if we could corroborate our story with the testimony of John Bolton. However, if we don't also believe that there's a serious chance that the Senate would vote to remove him, we might just wait for the damn book to be published and get the testimony then. And if we're going to try him in the court of public opinion anyway, let's try him in the court of public opinion plus book tour and drag this thing out. You should at least be willing to threaten that as leverage against Republican senators who may be sweating it and saying, well, I'll call Bolton if you call, if we can also call Biden, to which I might say, well, wait a second. Is Bolton my witness or your witness? I mean, I know the conventional wisdom here is that he's supposed to somehow be my witness. But one, he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat. He's not my witness. Two, I don't really trust him a great deal and I don't know what exactly he's going to say. Don't call witnesses as yours who you don't know for sure what they're going to say. And three, you seem to be the one who needs Bolton to testify to satisfy some weird itch you've got. I think he might corroborate the case we've made, but the case we've made is solid. And the members of the voting public have heard it, and now they've heard about Bolton, and they're putting two and two together. Now, they are either going to take things out on you when you vote to exonerate or to acquit the president. We'll say that instead. When you vote to acquit the president, despite all the evidence, they may hold that against you. Now, if you're looking to spare yourself from what you think might be a majority of voters in your district or your state by declaring yourself in favor of disciplining or removing Trump from office, then vote that way. That's all there is to it. I'm not going to say, you're asking me to do your job for you. You've been complaining about that for 2 weeks. I'm not going to help you now. I think it would be interesting to hold that out as leverage and say, I really don't have all that much motivation to accept the deal of a 1-for-1 trade. If you want to hear from John Bolton because you think the pressure has built among the public to the point where you can't resist it, then vote for it. I'll vote with you. I'll vote yes too. But if you'll only vote yes if I also vote yes on Biden, I don't have any reason to want to call Biden necessarily. Now, there is a mode of thinking where it would be beneficial perhaps to Democrats or to Biden himself to say, hell yeah, I'll testify, let's go. I know I've seen Armando floating it. I've not seen Biden floating it, but I don't know what I don't know what he's thinking. He might think that's crazy. He might think it's great. He just wants to stay out of things. I don't know. But I wouldn't offer him up necessarily. I'd wait and see whether I thought Republicans would do the heavy lifting of subpoenaing Bolton themselves. Pardon me. Hold on just a moment. Okay. Let's get back to the story here and see what Neil Katyal's thinking. So he says, Republican members of the Senate have signaled that they intend to uphold Mr. Trump's unprecedented decision to block all of this material. That seems still to be true, despite the increasing numbers. Somebody else was mentioning that they thought that in private, or was it Mitt Romney now saying, or maybe someone else, saying that they thought perhaps as many as 5 or 10 Republicans might be wavering on the question of witnesses. Why, or exactly what their alternative is, I don't know. But that's out there. It turns out they don't get to make that choice, continues Katyal, and I need to keep one eye on the KITM hashtag in case any of the rest of you remember, for instance, who it was that floated the 5 to 10 number. So, it turns out, says Katyal and et al., they don't get to make that choice. Chief Justice John Roberts does. In a manner of speaking. This isn't a matter of Democrats needing 4 moderate, in scare quotes, moderate Republicans to vote for subpoenas and witnesses, as the Trump lawyers have been claiming. Rather, the impeachment rules, like all trial systems, put a large thumb on the scale of issuing subpoenas and place that power within the authority of the judge, in this case, the Chief Justice. Yes, I would read impeachment rules slightly differently, but, let's continue on. By the way, also, at this point, I will interject this. Somebody had a great point last night, and I probably could figure out relatively quickly who that was, but pointing out that, you'll need a little bit more than 4. I mean, technically, 4 would be the number you would need to get to cross over and vote with Democrats in favor of calling witnesses at all. But we were reminded that one, that's the bare minimum, and of course, if anybody wavers at the last minute, you lose. And secondly, that you should be reminded by the case, I think it might have been NYC Southpaw pointing this out the other day, in the case of Kavanaugh's nomination, when it looked like you might get enough Republicans to waver on the question of ordering an additional investigation before the confirmation vote, and you did get that number. But they came over weak of conviction, let's say. By the way, Kate Sherrill, thanks very much, offers up the possibility that it was Angus King, and I think that rings a bell for me. Angus King of Maine, who said that there was a number of 5 to 10 out there. I don't know how he is as a whip, but we can at least attribute it to him. But Southpaw was pointing out on the question of the Kavanaugh investigation, you got the votes that you needed to force some additional investigation, but they were soft votes, and they were able to be manipulated by Mitch McConnell into saying, okay, well, now that you've rebelled, let's see if I can't corral you a little bit and say, maybe we could put some serious barriers in the way of a real investigation, or establish some parameters that would render it essentially a useless investigation. All you did when you stood up as a rebel and as a maverick to thwart the Republican juggernaut, you said you wanted an investigation. Well, a lot like the Burisma investigation, you've announced it, but it doesn't really matter what the results are, right? So how about this? We won't put your head on a pike if you agree that some sham investigation that just declares him to be a great guy, after all, will be acceptable to you. And then it was, and then Kavanaugh got confirmed. Jeff Flake flaked out and joined the other side in demanding an investigation, and then was absent from the fight over what the parameters of the investigation would be. So he said, let's have an investigation in name only, and that will satisfy me. And then poof, he was gone from the political scene, and Brett Kavanaugh was a Supreme Court justice. So be aware that, for one thing, you would want a cushion of 5 to 10 members who said they really were going to do this stuff in case people flake out. And two, you need to have enough people who are going to stand strong and say, for instance, the procedure that you propose for bringing the witnesses forward, or the one-for-one trade that you propose, is not acceptable to us. We're going to continue to stay voting with the other side until we get an arrangement that means something. That's the real contest. But it's hard to fit in a column. Anyway, so back to Katyal and Edwards and was it Geltzer? Okay. This is their proposition. Republicans, that it isn't a matter of Democrats needing 4 moderate Republicans to vote for subpoenas and witnesses, as the Trump lawyers have been claiming, and everybody else who can count. Rather, the impeachment rules, like all trial systems, put a large thumb on the scale of issuing subpoenas. The authority is in the hands of the judge, in this case, the Chief Justice. Yes, subpoenas are issued ultimately by the presiding officer, in this case, the Chief Justice. But it's what do they call it? Not perfunctory, but it's all a magisterial role. It's not him deciding necessarily whether or not subpoenas will be issued. They're issued in his name at the behest of the U.S. Senate. So you should keep that in mind as they continue to explain. Most critically, it would take a 2/3 vote, not a majority, of the Senate to overrule that. I don't think that's actually the case. But I don't know why he's saying this. Well, I'm already lost in this thing because I keep deviating from it to give other commentary. The impeachment rules, like all trial systems, put a large thumb on the scale of issuing subpoenas and place that power within the authority of the judge, in this case, the Chief Justice. Most critically, it would take 2/3 vote, not a majority, of the Senate to overrule that. I'm still not certain what they're talking about. Are they saying that the Chief Justice could, of his own volition, issue the subpoenas? He could do that, by the way. It's just that John Roberts isn't the kind of person who would take that authority seriously and use it. But to overrule his issuance of a subpoena, I am not certain why they think it would require a 2/3 vote. It could be that it's buried in the special Senate impeachment rules, but ordinarily, no, 51 votes will overrule the chair on just about anything. And of course, with the nuclear option available to you, 51 votes will overrule anything. This week it says Democrats can and should ask the Chief Justice to issue subpoenas on his authority so that key witnesses of relevance like John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney appear in the Senate, and the Senate should subpoena all relevant documents as well. It's absolutely the case that Democrats can and should ask the Chief Justice to do that, because why not? The Senate rules for impeachment, here we are, date back to 1868, and they're linked here. And, I'll probably spend time offline trying to find out about the overruling business. But Senate rules for impeachment date back to 1868 and have been in effect since that time. They specifically provide for, here we are, the subpoena of witnesses, going so far in Rule 24 as to outline the specific language a subpoena must use. It goes on to tell you what that language would be, but that's useless verbiage at this point. As you can see, there is no Senate vote requirement whatsoever in the subpoena rule. A manager can seek it on his own. The rules further empower the Chief Justice to enforce the subpoena rule. Rule 5 says the presiding officer shall have the power to make and issue by himself or by the Secretary of the Senate all orders, mandates, writs, and precepts authorized by these rules or by the Senate, and to make and enforce such other regulations and orders in the premises as the Senate may authorize or provide. The presiding officer under our Constitution is the Chief Justice. As such, the Chief Justice, as presiding officer, has the power to make and issue by himself subpoenas. President Trump's allies have tried to distort a separate rule, also still in effect, hoping that it could be stretched to say that a majority of senators can override the Chief Justice's decision. Rule 7 reads in the relevant part, the presiding officer on the trial may rule on all questions of evidence, including but not limited to questions of relevancy, materiality, and redundancy of evidence and incidental questions, which ruling shall stand as a judgment of the Senate, unless some member of the Senate shall ask that a formal vote be taken thereon, in which case it shall be submitted to the Senate for decision without debate. So President Trump's allies are hoping that the last clause authorizes a majority of the senators to override the Chief Justice on matters including subpoena issuance. But its plain text says otherwise, and here we'll do this over the music before we leave for our first break. It's carefully drawn to be about questions of evidence, whether, for example, a line of witness questioning is relevant or not. The issuance of a Rule 24 subpoena, however, is not a question of evidence. In normal litigation, we'd call it a discovery question. If only it was normal litigation, which it isn't, which throws a huge cloud over all of this, but I believe there are bigger clouds than just that. We'll take a break and be right back and see if they are addressed further down in this essay. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. There's just no way I'm going to be able to thumb through the entirety of the Senate rules on impeachment during a fake commercial break. I thumbed down, I scrolled down a little bit. We'll have to read it more thoroughly. I really don't know what they're basing the idea that it requires a 2/3 vote to overrule the ruling of the chair on these things. But it could be buried in there. It would be unlike them to make such a mistake without something to lean on, but who knows. Whatever one calls it here, it simply isn't an evidence question. Remember that we were deciding whether or not it mattered that in normal litigation, they would call the question of whether to call witnesses a discovery question. Whatever one calls it here, it simply isn't an evidence question. It's not about whether to admit into evidence a particular document, but about obtaining that document in the first place. And it's not about whether a witness must answer a specific question, but about forcing that witness to at least show up. I can make that distinction. And that threshold question is what they really say, falls squarely under Rule 5, meaning under the Chief Justice's authority alone. And that's why the Senate, despite outlining the rules for subpoenas, never made its subpoena rules governed by Rule 7. It is interesting. But at the very least, it's all premised on the idea that the Chief Justice will opt to make this decision himself, as opposed to saying, well, why don't I put that to you, the senators, to decide whether or not you will subpoena this witness? And I'm sure he would much prefer to do that. So that ends that inquiry. But let's say he decides to. If there were any doubt, they say, recall the language of the Constitution which orders that in an impeachment trial of the president, the Chief Justice shall preside. To preside, this is really not great. To preside is not merely a symbolic role. It can mean, just as it meant during President Andrew Johnson's impeachment trial, to be asked to make a range of actual rulings, including ones on which the Chief Justice is not merely the first word, but also the last. There's a reason that, to our knowledge, no Chief Justice presiding over a president's impeachment trial has had to confront precisely this issue before. No president has tried to hide all of the facts from Congress before. To be sure, previous presidents facing the prospect of impeachment, like Presidents Nixon and Clinton, have been accused of failing to share all the information sought from them, but no one ever vowed, as Mr. Trump has, to continue fighting all the subpoenas, regardless of their particular validity. Of course, I don't think Republicans would argue this, but you could say, well, what value does a Trump vow have? What are you so afraid of? He's promised to fight all subpoenas, regardless of their validity. In all likelihood, he will stop fighting subpoenas any day now, based solely on his record with promises. But this one, I agree, he's likely to keep. Ultimately, some accommodation was reached in previous impeachment inquiries as to the scope of information provided, including, for Mr. Clinton's impeachment trial, an eventual agreement on witness testimony. If Chief Justice Roberts is being asked to answer difficult questions, it is a direct result of President Trump's scorched earth approach to congressional oversight. Again, true. If he's being asked to answer difficult questions, it's because Trump has made things difficult. However, he can simply say, I'm not gonna. You do it. The framers' wisdom in giving this responsibility to a member of the judiciary, expected to be apolitical and impartial, has never been clearer or more poorly founded. But, okay. With key Republican senators having told the American people that they prejudged the case against President Trump before it began, and even working with Mr. Trump's lawyers to build the very defense for which they're supposed to be the audience, the notion that they're doing the impartial justice that they've sworn to do is very much in question. Does that matter to Chief Justice Roberts? I don't think so. The Democrats' impeachment managers should immediately ask the Chief Justice to issue subpoenas for key witnesses and documents, insisting that the Senate rules make him and him alone the decision maker about whether to make and enforce those subpoenas. That's his prerogative and his responsibility. When he can't simply shift to the senators as permitted for evidentiary questions under the Rule 7 carve-out. What happens next won't be totally within Democrats or the Chief Justice's control. As Representative Adam Schiff acknowledged Thursday, the Chief Justice can decide evidence questions like executive privilege, but his determinations can be overruled by a majority of senators. Likewise, when witnesses and documents arrive at the Senate, if questions arise about actual evidentiary rulings, like whether Mr. Bolton or Mr. Mulvaney can be forced to answer particular questions, a majority of senators can, under Rule 7, overrule the Chief Justice. But the first step is getting them to the Senate in the first place. There's icing on this cake. The special rules for Mr. Trump's impeachment trial, drafted by the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, established certain obstacles for witness testimony, requiring a deposition first, and only then a Senate vote on whether to allow the witness to testify. But those rules apply only to a particular category of witnesses, those called if the Senate agrees to them. They manifestly don't apply when it's the Chief Justice who orders witnesses to appear. Mr. McConnell's rules separately say that the Senate shall debate, quote, whether it shall be in order to consider and debate under the impeachment rules any motion to subpoena witnesses or documents. That language cannot restrict Rule 5's pre-existing empowerment of the Chief Justice to issue subpoenas. To amend Rule 5, there's where they're talking about it, requires a 2/3 vote of the Senate. Something Mr. McConnell didn't get. That is presumably why the rules speak only to whether the Senate should subpoena witnesses or documents, or rather, the Senate should subpoena witnesses or documents, but do not restrict the Chief Justice's ability to issue subpoenas under his Rule 5 authority. And that's precisely what the Democrats must ask him to do now. Sure, go for it, and he'll decline, and that'll be that. But, I agree, it's worth asking for, even if you know you're going to be rejected. I don't necessarily agree that their interpretation of what it would take to overrule him on the question of calling witnesses necessarily requires changing the rules and therefore a 2/3 vote. So we have that problem looming out there. But okay, confront let make him go nuclear. That's okay. I mean, I think that would be beneficial. I think Democrats benefit from asking for something that seems like a routine part of a trial from a judge, the judge saying, yes, let's do it, and the Republican Senate saying, we substitute our judgment for that of the Chief Justice of the United States in helping to cover up the crimes of Donald Trump. Beautiful, fantastic. Definitely make that request. Don't necessarily think that you know what the results are going to be. And I guess be prepared to waive the rule book and say you're breaking all the rules and then watch them be trampled. But, we're used to that. That happens all the time. There's no reason to be afraid of that. I think there was also an answer at some point offered up by Sarah Binder responding to this piece. Yeah, here it is. The New York Times opinion claim that the Chief Justice can unilaterally issue a subpoena for witnesses seems a weak reading of impeachment rules. Authors overlook critical rule, in this case 6, that states the Senate shall have the power to compel the attendance of witnesses. It does seem like it speaks directly to part of the problem, doesn't it? Granted, Senate impeachment rules can be ambiguous if you line up all the rules that touch on orders, writs, witnesses, etc. But ambiguity is often baked into Senate rules. They don't foresee every application, and the Senate majority is ultimately the interpreter of its meanings and its rules. The presiding officer, here the Chief Justice, isn't endowed with great parliamentary powers during impeachment trials. The role is to execute decisions of the Senate, magisterial, as I was saying. And as with the Senate generally, a Senate majority is the ultimate arbiter of procedural questions. And lastly, senators can, of course, try the tactic proposed in the op-ed, but ultimately the power of Democrats to succeed in calling witnesses is likely to depend on securing Republican votes for their procedural gambit. And I think I largely agree with that conclusion. Or maybe I agree with it entirely. I think it's unlikely to succeed, but they should absolutely try it for various reasons, including the political. Speaking of the political questions swirling around things, I noticed yesterday, if you watched a great deal of the arguments from the president's defense team, I recommend that you seek some medical attention or perhaps psychiatric care. I was barely tempted to watch very much of the House manager's presentation, but I did for historical purposes. I tuned in here and there during the defense presentation, but, it was just a little too annoying and frustrating in most places. I didn't see any of Dershowitz, thankfully. Very, very little, maybe next to none from Ken Starr. I saw some others among the defense team make slightly more of their presentations. But I also happened to see something last night that I thought was of some interest. Ordinarily, I would find, generally speaking, what's his name? Michael Tracy and his tweets uninteresting, inflammatory, and not particularly insightful. But, sometimes, yeah. And I mean, I don't block the guy and I don't mute him because, like with others of the very annoying set, occasionally they strike a chord and they're useful as a sort of conscience out there, just testing the outer limits of what I think is generally applicable and my usual rules and mode of operation. And occasionally they prod me to think about what's really going on here and whether I agree across the board either with what Democrats are doing or whatever it is, whatever the issue is. So, there's a lot of people that I continue to listen to just in case, to sort of double check myself. He's not really among them, but occasionally he brings something up. In this case, what has happened is he's brought something up that I was concerned that others might give credence to. I don't give any credence to it, and I don't give you necessarily any points for adopting this position, but it's explicable at the very least. Very often what Michael Tracy adopts as his position is inexplicable to me, and I can't imagine how you got there, and it's not worth the debate. And I don't intend to have a debate with him or anybody else over this, and I'm positive he has no interest in conducting a debate with me, not because he fears my awesome debate skills, but because he doesn't know who I am and doesn't care, and probably would look at my profile and say, Daily Kos, well, of course. And then something. But he brings up something that I think that normal people could come to this conclusion, and they shouldn't. And so I chose to address it. And I think we can address it without saying that Michael Tracy or anybody else who might come to this conclusion is an idiot. It's not idiotic to come to this conclusion. It's just dangerous. Dershowitz, he says, raised a valid hypothetical in his presentation. Now, most of us right off the bat disagree, but it was this. Say a future president, like, of course, Michael proposes, say, Bernie, right? Say a future president withholds aid to Israel unless Israel ceases settlement construction. That, that's a position that's fairly common, and I don't know if you would get a presidential candidate to endorse such a position, maybe not even Bernie Sanders at this point, but let's say you do. It would make some Democrats very happy, right? Okay, so why not? Try it, right? So, withhold aid to Israel unless they cease settlement construction. Now, Tracy says, per this precedent, the one that Dershowitz was trying to outline as an example of why it would be a bad idea to continue with this impeachment, per this precedent, Bernie, or whoever that president is, could be accused of impeachable offenses if he can be portrayed as obtaining a political benefit by doing so. Just to clarify, there's an additional tweet in his mini threads here. He says, the point is, you cannot easily disentangle presidential actions taken for the purpose of advancing the national interest versus actions taken for the purpose of deriving a political benefit, especially if your means of ascertaining this involves divining the president's mental state. And that is a good point by itself. It may or may not be inherent to what Dershowitz was actually saying. It certainly wasn't necessary for what he was trying to illustrate. But that's I think Dershowitz would purposefully try to blur the line between a better outlining of the question, like in Michael's second tweet, with this more broad oversimplification that's in the first tweet, that under the precedent that he claims Democrats are trying to establish with Trump, that any president would be and could be and would be accused of impeachable offenses if there's a political benefit that can be divined from his taking any particular action. And Michael has been concerned about this, and a lot of people have been concerned about this in the realm of foreign policy decisions, but there's no real reason to confine it to foreign policy. It would work just as well or as badly in domestic policy. And here's the part that I don't think Dershowitz addressed, but I don't know because I didn't listen to him, but I doubt it. And I don't think he addressed it because it refutes the whole thing and requires some understanding of how government operates, and not even necessarily our particular government, but pretty much all governments, they have their own processes for this because this is a common problem. How do you tell the difference between a policy decision which is chiefly or purely political in nature, that is, meaning it inures to the decision maker's political benefit, versus the national interest? I mean, usually they coincide, and that's why it's impossible to separate the two. If things are working right, then the president does right by the country. The voters recognize that the president has done right, and they reward him with popularity and support and vote to return him to office because he's been so steadfast in safeguarding the national interest. So doing the national interest is a political benefit of sorts to, a president seeking re-election. So how do you separate those two things? Well, the answer, you might guess, because this is Kagro in the Morning Show, is in process and procedure. That's how you tell the difference. So I answer, Michael, this way. Well, how can you get out from underneath this precedent that would supposedly accuse a Democratic president of impeachable offenses if they withheld aid to Israel unless it ceased settlement construction? The answer is, for starters, don't violate the Impoundment Control Act when you withhold the aid, and you'll be in much better shape. For one thing, you will not have broken a law, and apparently that's very meaningful to Republicans. But in addition, you will, by abiding by protocols and processes and laws and norms, keep yourself out of the realm of the abnormal, for which we impeach people, and well within the realm of the normal, for which we sometimes might impeach people, but which would be ordinarily very difficult to get to 67 votes for removal on. What are we talking about? Well, for one thing, if you wanted to withhold aid to Israel unless it ceased settlement construction, you would have to notify Congress that you were taking this position and what you were doing and why. And then, right from that point on, you have now differentiated yourself and distinguished your actions from Trump's. We now have two different cases, and problem is solved. But to expand on things a little bit, notify Congress of your position. Take advantage of all the opportunities you have to weigh in during the authorizations process, the appropriations process. Send representatives from the administration to testify at the subcommittee and committee level before the Committee on Foreign Affairs in the House and the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, explaining that you oppose the expansion of settlements in Israel, and it's your intention that it be American foreign policy to oppose them, and that you want to oppose them robustly by withholding aid until that demand is met, if that's how you want to play it. And see if you can't convince people on the subcommittee and then at the full committee level in the authorization process, and similarly at the subcommittee and full committee levels in the appropriations process, and as the things are being voted on the floor. And if they disagree with you all the way to the point where it gets to the floor, see if you can't find a champion to support an amendment, striking language, making appropriations for aid to Israel unless this thing happens. And of course, there would be opportunities to amend things in the markups at subcommittee and full committee level. There's a million places to intervene, and even intervene and lose is okay. Because the point there is you are establishing a track record. It's not that you can't be at the end of all this, or even in the middle of all this, by the way, accused of letting political considerations drive your policy anyway. People will always accuse you of that. And that is normal. It's normal, one, to allow political considerations to drive policy, and two, it's normal to accuse people of allowing political considerations to drive their policy. Why isn't every president before him being impeached? Why isn't every president that now comes after going to be impeached? under this standard? Because what protects you from having the charges of political corruption stick is the process and the protocol, as I've explained before on the show. It's not just red tape, this stuff. It's a check and a balance. It's a diffusion of power that helps validate the end result, right? It's not just the president secretly saying, I'm going to withhold this from Israel unless X, and doing so in contravention of a duly adopted act of Congress, and one that you've signed into law, by the way, or at least allowed to become law without making a veto objection. It's, blunt instrument, the veto, but if you really believe in it, use it. If you believe in signing statements, use that. And you're afraid to veto it, sign the legislation, but say it's my intention to withhold this money. The point is that you need to put everyone who's got a hand in this power on notice. And if you do, you are already different from Donald Trump. So, a decision to withhold aid to Israel, for instance, may or may not be chiefly political. But the problem that we have with what Donald Trump is doing is we like to avoid, and here's some more buzzwords you've heard here before, arbitrary and capricious decision-making. It's arbitrary and capricious decision-making that gives rise to a presumption that there's some wrongdoing behind it. There may be, there may not be, but it requires investigation. And really all the investigation is after here is, why do you want to do this? And in the case of Donald Trump, why wouldn't you tell us that you wanted to do this? It makes us suspicious. But if you do tell us, and you do tell us why, it may make us suspicious that politics is the driver, but it doesn't bring us into the arbitrary and capricious decision-making problem. A paper trail, sending representatives to the subcommittee and full committee markups of the authorization and appropriations bills. Having a champion sponsor floor amendments seeking to put you on the record. And just one more time, I want to give the Congress another chance to try to adopt my position. If you're into it, inserting a signing statement along with your signature on the bill, or vetoing the bill and forcing the 2/3 of the Congress in both houses to override you. You have to give the Congress a chance to say, we hear you, and we either agree or we stand in opposition to you and insist on spending this money anyway. You might say, well, what about the president's prerogative to make foreign policy? Well, it's not the president's alone. And quite honestly, the idea that Bernie Sanders supporters or any other presidential candidate supporters would be interested in making it their candidate's prerogative alone and leaving it there, that's the departure from the norms. And B, that's the danger. We have the Trump fans insisting that that's the case and that's the way things ought to work, and we have a problem. And it would create the same problem. That problem is it's easy to recreate it, just don't tell anybody what you're doing. But it's also easy to avoid it. That's the point. And to differentiate any future case from that of Donald Trump. A paper trail of reasoned opposition to the funding or whatever your problem is from its earliest stages avoids the arbitrary and capricious problem. And it's arbitrary and capricious stuff that rises to the level of impeachment for a president. Give your reasons and give them openly and consistently. And you could still be accused of being political about it, but you can't be accused of being arbitrary and capricious. But I suppose you could give a stupid, capricious reason all along, and then you'd, I guess, still have that problem. But assuming that you're giving a reasoned argument all the way along, then you should have no problem. Now, if your argument is, I just feel like it, and your argument itself, the paper trail evidences arbitrary and capricious decision-making, well, then you're still back in the same problem. But it's not that easy to imagine that The real precedent being set here is that all presidents from this point forward are required to be obtuse and stupid. That's not the precedent being established. It's that if a president is equally obtuse and stupid, yeah, he's going to get impeached. But if he just shares information about what it is he's doing and why he wants to do it, that's fine. That's a policy disagreement, not an end run around Congress. It's actually pretty easy to see, I think. But I don't know. Then I was told that, well, Michael Tracy was really only doing this because he too wanted to be obtuse and stupid. And, I've seen enough people make that complaint frequently enough that maybe it's true. I just don't know him well enough. But I thought I would engage the question earnestly and see if anybody wanted to carry that argument forward in diffusing it anytime you saw anybody who might ordinarily be opposed to what Dershowitz has to say, but found themselves somehow cornered by the logic of his presentation. So, should that happen to you or anyone you know, and medical attention is not immediately available, use that argument. It's the process that protects you. It's not there to get in your way. It's there to protect you. We've made that argument before. All right. Coming now to our next break. We'll take that in just a bit, and that puts us into our second hour. I am reliably informed that Joan McCarter will, in fact, be with us today. I would suspect that would happen in this next upcoming hour. I don't know where or when, but that's just to keep you on your toes. I like it that way. How reliable is my source on this? It's Joan. So, yes, very, the most possible. Yes, I would say so. All right. We'll be back discussing this and much more. I don't feel any need to discuss this any further than the few seconds I have left before the break, but I wanted to let everybody know that I hate the idea of caucuses. We can spend about 5 seconds on that when we get back, but I believe you all hate the idea of caucuses too, so you won't need any convincing on that one. I'll tell you why that came to mind after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. All right, let's see if we can keep this to a minimum. There are many more important things to discuss, but since the Iowa caucuses do loom, and we can use this to transition back to impeachment, believe it or not, happened to notice yesterday the tweet of NBC reporter Ben Pugh, P-U. How do you like that? That's a tough name to have to grow up with. We're weird here in America, and we laugh at these things. But let's be serious for just a moment. His name's Ben Pugh, and I'm not even making that up. I feel bad about that already. I've ruined the story. Anyway, Ben did some yeoman's work here in covering what was it? Let's scroll back and figure out what it was. The Drake University mock caucus, the mock Democratic Presidential Preference Caucus, which seems like an excellent idea, a great exercise to teach the students there about the caucusing process, which I think everybody should go through when it doesn't matter in an exercise like this, just to understand it, I guess. But this was really interesting, and I watched him reporting on this, and it was particularly grabbed by the conclusion of all of it, which described the process of, well, long story short for this caucus, they all show up, and just like a real caucus, they have a viability threshold. It is 15%, which I think matches the Iowa caucus rules, and I think that was the whole point of all of this. But anyway, they had a 15% viability threshold, and we all know what that means. I mean, do all of us understand the caucus process? I mean, I might not, but my understanding of it is, you show up at the thing, and you're thrown into a room, depending on the size of the caucus you've got. Could be somebody's living room, could be the local gym at the high school. And you basically, there's time for candidates or candidate proxies to make speeches to try to convince people, because we're supposed to be doing this logically. And then you break up into groups. You just literally, the Yang people stand over here, and the Klobuchar people stand over there, and the Bernie people stand over there, and you just say, go to your group. Who do you want to vote for? You want to vote for Bernie? Go to the Bernie group and stay there. Now we open things up for a period during which people can make up their mind. If they're not sure, they can talk to people in 1, 2, 3, 10, however many groups they want, and try to become convinced. People, you can talk to the group neighboring. You can go around the room to groups not neighboring you and try to convince people to leave that group and come over to your group. And anyway, eventually at the end of this process, with various stops along the way, they take a look and they say, all right, we have to do math, which is already problematic. Right? Why would you involve any math beyond this is how many people voted for this guy and this is for how many people voted for that one, and this number is higher than that, and so that's it. We've figured it all out. But this is what the caucus does. How many people attended? If 100 people attend the caucus, there's got to be 15 people in your group in order to make the 15% threshold. So what happened here is, I don't know how many people attended, but they got a picture. Here's the Sanders group. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I don't know, 13, 14 people in it. I don't know how many people were at the caucus. But apparently that doesn't cut the mustard for viability threshold. And the question is then, it's put to the Sanders people and anybody else who doesn't meet viability. Your votes don't count, essentially. You got to now decide on a second choice and go stand with that based on a second choice from among the people who have currently got viability. Or I guess, I don't know whether there's a step in between where they say, well, you have 14 out of the 15 you need. You have now 15 minutes to get a 15th person, wherever you get them from. But at the end of the process, if you don't have your 15%, they say, all right, well, it's time for you now to choose from among this list of candidates who do have 15%. And apparently what some number of the Bernie preferring participants did was said, Bernie is my only choice, and so I'm going home. And of course, that's problematic, and it raises serious questions typically among the people who are not for Bernie in real life, right here, right now, but for someone else, and saying, this is a thing I have thought about Bernie supporters. They're Bernie or bust, and they won't participate in the process as Democrats and make a second choice selection. And that's true, and it's true that it's annoying, and it's true that it's worrisome, but it is a real thing, and real people will do it. And it's problematic, but it's also a problem at this stage in the primary elections that's avoidable. It may not be avoidable in the general election. There are people, of course, who would say, well, if the nominee isn't, just to get off of the typical Bernie business. I assume somewhere there's somebody who says, if the nominee is not Amy Klobuchar, I am not voting. Not that they'll vote for Trump, although I guess in the world of 300 million of us, there is someone who says that too. But more likely, there would be two people who would say, if it's not Klobuchar, I'm not voting at all. And there's only so much you can do, of course, to keep people engaged in the process. But at the primary stage, why lose people at that point? What ends up happening here is, here's the conclusion. The final tweet in Ben's thread here is, caucus adjourned. Not a lot of smiling faces in these groups. This was a bruising and emotional process, and many people looked hurt or saddened. Now, a lot of people reacted to that because it was Bernie Sanders people that he thought he was talking about, because he had just earlier said they were the ones who wanted to go home. Well, good. Screw them. They should be hurt or saddened. They're doing terrible things to America or the party or both. But remember, they went home. So Ben is reporting on the end of the caucus here, and still not a lot of smiling faces. The Bernie or bust people have self-selected themselves out of the room. Everybody else who has agreed to go by the rules, and who the majority of whom never entertained voting for Bernie Sanders, are likewise bruised and emotional and looking hurt or saddened. And here's my thing. We've talked a lot about how caucuses are exclusionary, how they are so exclusionary that they might even rise to the level of voter suppression because of how much time you have to spend on them, et cetera, et cetera. I have this to add. What are we doing when a perfectly viable alternative is available to us, hurting people and saddening them at the primary level or at any level? If you can count people's presidential preference and not hurt them or sadden them and keep them engaged at that point and have a shot at least at saying to them, well, I understand you're disappointed, but you still should participate in the process going forward. And you have an easier time of that because you weren't just screaming in their face about how they're an idiot for voting for Andrew Yang or Amy Klobuchar or pick your candidate. And by the way, what's the big problem? If 10% of Iowa prefers Bernie Sanders, and they, by all reports, it's a lot more, so I'll switch to another candidate. If 10% of Iowa voters prefer, I don't know, who haven't we picked? Pete Buttigieg. Oh, he's doing better than that, too. Marianne Williams. What's the harm in recording that and perhaps even learning from it if you're a party official in Iowa? Wow, I didn't think 10% of the people here liked Marianne Williams, and I'm not certain what we're going... Williamson? I can't even remember her name. I should have picked somebody else. Andrew Yang. God, I'll stick with him. I didn't think that was possible, but it is, and I don't really know how to inform Democratic politics going forward when it comes to this. But, why hurt people is essentially the thing, and why not record that? 10% of the people wanted that. We still have a 15% threshold for awarding delegates at the end, but let them express their preference and, well, frankly, let them express their preference and go home. Don't keep them here all day long, especially if you're just going to embarrass and hurt them. So I hate the idea of caucuses, and here I am you see I'm a political junkie, obviously. You couldn't get me to go. I would actually say, you know what I've sometimes wondered, what would move me to just say, to hell with it, I'm not voting. And I realized last night the answer is, put me in a caucus state. That's how I would vote in the general election. But when it comes to presidential preference, I would at that point be saying, I'd rather have a bunch of idiots decide for me than have to stand with these idiots and help them decide. So I'm selfish that way. Now, Joan has joined us, and I gather, Joan, that you're not a big caucus fan either.
I am totally here for the caucus bashing.
Okay, excellent. That brought you in. All right, let's do it.
I have caucused.
I find that you have. Okay, so
I have.
You've at least got that experience. I am guessing, but
yes.
Okay.
And in Washington State in 2008, and it is not a good process for people who are not loud and opinionated and confident.
Yeah. It would seem to be that way.
Which, I am, and I still came out of it just really displeased with the whole process.
I can believe it. I mean, who wants to stand there and be told, and you know how things are in our in primary states, if you decide to argue with people, you're going to hear this, but who wants to go out for 3 hours or even 5 minutes and stand there for your candidate and have the people in the next group over saying, do you know what your candidate's cousin said in 1982? This is outrageous. How could you possibly, as a moral person, stand? Oh, my God. What?
And then that's, mild browbeating.
Yeah, that's not even too bad.
It's and then the standing for 3 hours is part of the issue, too.
Yes.
They're undemocratic. They keep so many people out of the process.
Yes.
I haven't been in Idaho because what they've done in Idaho, the Democratic Party doesn't have a whole lot of money here in the county.
And that is a big issue.
They open up one site.
Yeah.
One. And, in the last couple of years, or last couple of cycles rather, something like 10,000 people show up.
Ugh. I mean,
it takes all day.
Nice,
it's completely disorganized. There are just too many people to try to deal with. There's no way that's democracy. You have to stand in line for 4 hours to even get into the building.
Yes, that's not good.
And then stay in the room for 3 hours while they're trying to sort these thousands of people, and it's confusing. You're trying to know what corner to go to.
That's
I really dislike caucuses.
I can imagine. It must. I mean, standing in line for 4 hours to get into the building is usually the sort of thing that conservatives pull out of the pocket to illustrate the evils of socialism for us. You have to wait that long for bread and toilet paper. Yeah,
Which,
well,
by the way, they enforce in Democratic-leaning districts in red states or precincts on election day.
yeah, right.
By only giving them a few malfunctioning machines.
Right, and there it's very clearly aimed at voter suppression. I don't know why you wouldn't think the same thing about the caucuses, except that I guess you have the right to go and stand there and yell whatever you want, so that must be democracy. But it creates huge issues.
If you have the hours to spare, if you don't have to get child care, if you aren't disabled.
Right. Yes, a lot of discussion of that last night, too.
If you are fine with having your vote be public.
That, too, right? I don't want that, necessarily.
I'm very much opposed to the caucus system.
Yeah.
More opposed to the caucus system in general than I am to even having Iowa go first, which is just irritating as hell.
Yes. And they could take the caucus reason away from us, and we'd still say, well, you still probably shouldn't go first.
Representative, Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah. Right.
Of who's in the Democratic Party these days.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that works for you as Republicans, and that's fine. You can do it your way. But I mean, so many complaints about it. I did hear, a few defenders of it, but it was, personal and weak defense. It's not meant to be generally applicable. I went and I loved it, or whatever. Or people say, well, that's so genuine, the idea of talking things out among Democrats to find your preferences, and it's not that much difference from ranked choice voting in the sense that you got to think ahead to the next rounds, etc. And for some people I'm sure it's fine, but I think for the majority it's a headache you don't need. It's embarrassing. It's
a
troublesome.
barrier to people who are not confident in knowing how the system works.
That's definitely true.
When you hear all of this, particularly folks in Iowa who are new to the system, when you hear about all of this second choices and arguing, and they're going to be turned off. Mm-hmm. So you end up with sort of professional caucusers.
Who really know what they're doing.
Running the thing. And there are communities. A friend of mine ran one in little Camas County, Idaho, with 12 people. And that's a nice social event for those 12 people. Yeah. To get together and get to talk about stuff and get to be Democrats nicely. In the middle of a red community. Yeah. It's nice for them. Yes. But, they can have a coffee clutch and do that separately. It doesn't have to happen in a caucus.
Right. Now, how about vote and then donuts?
Yeah.
That's fair. Wow, that was boring. I just marked some paper. Want to talk about it? Yes. Good. You two talk about it. How about you? You want to talk about it? No. All right. Don't.
Yeah.
Hey, what a great idea. Seems almost democratic.
Almost.
To allow people to do this. And here's a good point. Mike Musson pointing out here, the caucus cutoff, that is, I guess, the viability threshold in each individual caucus site, plus the fact that these caucuses are held differently across different locations, and if you happen to live in this town where there's only 14 Yang voters and you don't make viability, but over on the other side of the highway, there are plenty. He points out that this has a lot of the properties of the Electoral College and gerrymandering that we all are supposedly against. And why not just count everybody in the damn state? Or for that matter, nationally. But, okay, national primary seems like a bigger obstacle. But certainly you can rule out the caucus option quickly. But I love the idea if it goes well. But I hate the practice, which is what usually happens. And I think it seems like there's too much risk.
In the 19th and early 20th century, great. We're beyond that now.
Yeah. Maybe it was just as
And
rough back then, but who knows?
there are other ways to create community among Democratic voters. There are other
Yeah.
ways to get the town hall idea by like having town halls.
Yeah, right, sure. You could do that. All the campaigning that precedes a caucus is all that opportunity to come out and hear all the candidates in these first states. They'll come to your diner. Great.
Yeah.
Then vote. I mean, I guess just look at this. We're stuck in this cycle. It's Iowa and New Hampshire. They're always first. We have caucuses. Oh, well, New Hampshire doesn't. And look at that. They're also always first.
And Iowa still, there was a story yesterday that I didn't follow up on, but Iowa still hasn't addressed all of the issues of accessibility in their caucuses.
Right. Yeah.
There are still people who are going to be cut out of it because they physically can't be there. Mm-hmm. And that's just wrong.
Right. I think that's, yeah. Well, that's obviously true. So we don't like those. There are some issues still swirling around like, well, it costs money, or the party gets to run the state party pays for this or the national party pays for that. I can't even remember what the real the protocols are, but they get paid for differently. So when a state doesn't have a big budget for your party, they say they've got to do a caucus because they can't pay for the voting machines. But then,
right, and that's what Idaho always justified it as. But we got smart and stopped doing it.
Okay.
So this year there's not going to be a caucus. There's going to be a primary.
Well,
not that it'll
good.
count by the time we vote, but
okay. Yeah, I mean, there's also substitutes. I know that I've participated, for instance, once here in Virginia in what they were calling a firehouse caucus, which I took to mean I get to vote because I get to mark papers. I guess they used to hold them in the firehouse. Mine was in a library, but they said it wasn't a primary election because reasons, state involvement, funding, use of voting machines, etc. So it was a caucus, but to participate, I showed up, waited in line, filled out a paper that said who I was voting for with a little, X or a bubble next to them, just like voting. And I put it in the box. And then the people who wanted to stay there longer and bother themselves counted the votes and told me who won. All right. But it's a caucus. Therefore, the funding mechanisms are fixed and everything's just fine. But I got to vote and go home and nobody yelled at me. Awesome. Looks like you can fix caucuses. Why don't you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they are thinking about that in Iowa. They're just not doing it for various reasons and whatever. So I'm not moving to Iowa, and they're happy about that, and so am I. So good. But
it's not the answer, though.
Yeah, it did really get to me to the level of, I was saying, if somebody offered me a job in a state where they had caucuses, I would think twice about taking the job. Oh, I can't vote in the primary? I like doing that. I mean, I hate the primaries, but I do my job and I vote. And I'd be out of that process because you couldn't get me to go to one of these things. And so I'd rather, I might not take a job in that state. That's an economic development issue for you. Except that I'm not a very good worker, so maybe it's not.
You're a fine worker.
I'm doing my best.
Daily Kos appreciates you.
That's good. Thank you. I'm glad you
Although,
came here
if you felt like writing a story about the process parts of the Katyal op-ed in impeachment.
Yeah, I'll have to research that.
I wrote it up shortly yesterday
Okay.
because it was interesting to me and because I think it would be smart for House managers to indeed petition Chief Justice Roberts for subpoenas. I would very much encourage them to do so. But I had some questions about it in the process that weren't made entirely clear in the article.
Well, that might be a good idea. I was reading it and saying, I'm going to have to take this off air and read the rules. I'm not sure what they're talking about with this 2/3.
Please do read the rules. One thing that was not at all clear from that to me was whether Roberts can decide on his own, whether the presiding officer can decide that subpoenas are necessary and order them, or if he has to be requested by the House managers to do so.
Yeah, that's a good question. I imagine that, we'll see what the rules has to say, but I imagine that he's empowered to do that, but you're talking about John Roberts. He doesn't care what he's empowered to do. He does nothing if possible.
Maybe we can forge a note from Susan Collins asking him to do it.
That's possible. Oh, maybe we can forge a note from him saying he did it at that point.
That's even better.
Yeah, forge away. Forge the subpoena and just send it. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to believe that. I don't know what's harder to believe, that John Roberts would do more than is required from him when he's not on his turf in particular, or that Susan Collins would follow through and really ask for something that Trump is saying no to.
I wouldn't take bets either way.
Yeah, I don't know. So last day of opening arguments. I don't know how much time you've spent watching, or maybe you've been forced to professionally, but
I have been forced to professionally.
Yes, okay.
Yesterday was very difficult.
It was.
Because it was in turns and raging and just boring as anything. I did miss Dershowitz, which I'm fine with.
Good. All right. I'm fine with that as well.
Starr was just kind of bizarre.
Just the fact that he was there was even bizarre, but his presentation and too.
Lots of people pointed that out. Bondi and Hirschman were enraging.
Yes.
But particularly Hirschman.
They were terrible. Yes. I had the most to say about him. I agree with you.
Ending up, well, let's just impeach Barack Obama retroactively.
I guess so. You can. It's out there. Yeah, Hirschman, or whatever his name was quite enraging. But I'm sure that was probably Trump's favorite, because it was enraging and because it had a video presentation that made use of multimedia, like that montage of all the Democrats saying urgency.
Yes.
That was made for Trump.
Yes. Most of the arguments, I think, yesterday, well, Bondi was there for Trump. Hirschman was there for Trump. Clearly, it was an audience of one.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Republican senators just loved Dershowitz.
Yes, they were enthralled because he was offering them, a constitutional interpretation that, comports with their wishes but doesn't have any basis in reality. So easy. But boy, they were enthralled, all right. He's wrong. The
good news is he's too old to be a Supreme Court justice under Trump. So.
Right. Yes, they would not be willing to waste a slot on him. If he's got a son, maybe. I guess they could always do that. But yeah, it was some Bondi's presentation reminded me of nothing so much as the debate scene from Clueless, where,
yes,
quite honestly, I mean, she was really giving I'll admit it would be an adequate high school debate performance, not debate team. That you would not make the debate team with that, but a forced debate in social studies class. You wouldn't get an F because she was, speaking up. and saying things, but it was, the presentation was just even like awkward breaths and weird reading of the written material with the emphasis on the wrong part of the sentence, kind of thing, down to that level. Like, what?
Well, and on top of that, actually with a straight face making the anti-nepotism argument.
Yes, that was pretty remarkable. And, now we know we have to impeach those kids
Donald Trump.
Yeah. That was pretty amazing. And the tone of it, I also felt like both of them, Hirschman and Bondi, were very, very, very Pizzagate-y to me. That the conclusion was already there. And then they paid Hunter Biden money. I mean, come on, money. Yeah, Donald Trump paid you money. What does this mean? You were wrong to take it. And you said as much. But you've reached no conclusion here. You're just simply pointing to things and saying, ugh.
Well, also that Bondi was doing the corruption angle. Bondi, who received a $25,000 bribe from the Trump organization.
Yes. It was really...
To stop prosecution of Donald Trump's fake university in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, it just made no sense. Again, she was somebody else that I was very surprised to see even be there. But
it was entirely for Donald Trump. That was
so.
The Fox News blonde segment of his defense.
Yeah. Well, all right. So he enjoyed that. I enjoyed people commenting that she looked like she was addressing the United Federation of Planets, but that's that's a fashion angle that I think is unfair. But it wasn't a horrendous choice, but I don't usually give marks on that. We'll be right back in 2 minutes to discuss probably some more substantive angles on the impeachment and anything else that might come to mind. Yeah, right. There might not be any. We'll be back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Joan McCarter is still with us. I think we certainly could go on forever bashing the presentation in the impeachment, but there's not much substance to it. But you were telling me that they've got some idea of what the schedule is going to be. They're not planning on going to all hours tonight.
No, in fact, it's probably only going to be a couple of hours.
Okay.
Which, who knows what defense we're going to get in those 2 hours.
Right. They didn't do it. How much time is left? That's the way they could handle it. But
they probably will. It's going to be a lot more legally sounding word salad from them, I suspect.
All right, possibly true. Heretofore.
One of the things, I'm thinking back to what I saw of Dershowitz and what I heard from Dershowitz and what the more lawyerly types like Philbin were arguing, it's remarkable to me that they can stand there in front of the U.S. Senate and say that the executive has absolute power.
Yes.
And the hell with you guys. And the Republican Senate eats it up.
Oh, thank you for telling us we're useless. Yeah.
This is the thing that has remained remarkable to me. Everything that Trump has done has, from government shutdown to border wall to stealing that money to trying to claw back on rescissions, all of the things that he has done in direct violation of the Constitution and abrogating the power of the Congress.
Yeah.
And they're happy to hand their power over to him.
Right. Apparently. Well, you know, the Senate, the whole Senate, I've never seen the Senate as a whole, well, the Republicans anyway, so eager to insist that the substantive work on any subject has to be done by the House. And it's not our job to, I mean, that's a total misinterpretation of their role as the court trying an impeachment, of course, but that's their big excuse. And the big excuse as well, the House should have done this. The House should subpoena these witnesses. The House should have gathered all this testimony. We don't want to have any hand in this whatsoever. They ordinarily are saying, get the House out of the way. Everything should be done by the Senate, the Senate's way. And now here on this, why should appropriations be a matter for Congress? Screw it. You just tell us what happened to the money.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, that's just what we need to get through the day. So they'll argue that for today. anytime it comes up, as it's convenient, whether it's, torturing people, or we're at war or not at war, or you did or didn't appropriate this, or I did or didn't shoot that guy on Fifth Avenue. There is or isn't
Or
a
you
law
did
against
appropriate this by ignoring your
Yes.
appropriation and spending the
Sure.
money however the hell I want.
Yeah, right. I don't know why that doesn't bother them, but that's what they need to say to get through the day, and so they're going to do it. No indication.
Well, let's be clear. It would
Yeah.
bother them if it was a Democratic president doing
Yes,
it.
right. Well, then they would need the opposite to get through the day, and they would just do that instead. You bet. There's no chance that a Democrat would be permitted to do the same. They would be screaming that this is impeachable, and they would be quoting us.
And they would be right.
Yeah, that's how we know they were right. They would be quoting us, but they would use that against us. You used to say that this was, and sometimes there would be, I suppose, there could be nuances that are different as between the situations, and they would ignore those. But yeah, they would then claim to have always been for this, and then we would show them the video of them not being for it, and they would say, "Oh, this gotcha questioning," or whatever. I don't know. I was going to ask also. We know how long they're going to go, but there's no indication that they're going to try to start the clock on questioning today. Is there, or have they said they're ready to move to that? Or are they going to push that till starting tomorrow, or have a nice round?
I haven't seen that.
All right. I don't. I don't know whether that's out there or not. You would have seen it, I'm sure, if they'd been circulating it. But I can imagine them just saying, "All right, we'll do 8 hours of questioning Wednesday and Thursday, and vote on Friday." That seems to make sense to them. They want desperately to finish before the president does his superb owl interview, because he can't say Super Bowl or whatever. But apparently that's a big driving factor.
Owl.
Well, no owl can sue you.
I'm not going to be watching, by the way.
No?
Yeah, I am not saying I'm looking at my tweet deck floor action thing here, and I'm not seeing
Okay.
whether it's anything saying any tweets. I rely a lot on Twitter to find out what the hell's going on in the Senate.
Yeah. But, it's a great source for that, although, sometimes it's crazy.
Anyway,
Okay.
what we hear is rumors that they have 51 votes for witnesses.
Okay.
But we're
Yes,
also
right.
hearing a lot of, but we have to have a witness in return.
Yes.
Cornyn wants to hear from Schiff, which I think, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
We're paying attention to
yeah.
any of Schiff's work if they think having Schiff testify is going to be a good thing for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go through it. Go do it.
Okay.
Do it.
Who would do the questioning of him? He should do like Woody Allen in Bananas. Do his own
himself.
cross, right? Okay. I mean, he's probably going to handle things well. Or Schiff. All right. They do have a weird list.
They do have a weird list. I honestly, I say don't deal on witnesses.
Okay. Yeah. We were
Because
considering
there
that.
is the principle of the idea that, Biden can't shed any light on Trump's decision to withhold the funding. He can't.
Right. No, there's nothing he can do about that. I'm sure they would argue about all the other things, and I guess I'd rather not have him there to answer questions, period. He's not great at that. But even so, I mean, if he flubbed it entirely, so now we impeached him? All right, I guess. You could try that. I don't know how far that goes.
I would like to see Ron Johnson questioned.
That would be interesting. Yes, that's true. I mean, once you're open to saying, okay, well, members of the House management team can be questioned as witnesses, it should be open to anybody. Yeah, right. Why not? Question Mitch
Ron
McConnell,
Johnson
for that matter.
probably has
Mm-hmm. You are right.
What's the term I'm trying to look for? He was in the room.
Yeah.
He was in the room with the three amigos cooking this up.
Yeah, and
So,
he heard
yeah, he knows.
that's true, and he can tell us either truthfully or not what went on in the room and was there any linkage
Well, would he
mentioned?
say it truthfully?
I don't know. I mean, I guess
Maybe they
not.
could ask him a few questions about what he did when he was in Russia on the 4th of July in 2018.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people that could answer that question, I guess, and they should be witnesses too, maybe. But I don't. Yeah,
That would be the Russian security services, and I don't know if they would talk.
Yes. Well, but there were a lot of people, a lot of members there on the July 4th trip, weren't there?
There were.
So, okay, call some of them as witnesses, I guess, too. Well, I don't know whether they're going to cut a deal or not, but I think we talked a little bit about that early on in the show, that I think that the indication that Republicans are floating the idea that they're changing their minds should be put to the test by saying, if you're changing your mind, great. I mean, I'm not changing my mind about Hunter Biden testifying. There's no reason to change my mind about it. He doesn't add anything to the question of what was Donald Trump doing. So if you guys are feeling pressure that you can't live politically at home without at least having Bolton, then have Bolton. Don't ask me to do your work for you. That's what you've been complaining about the whole 2 weeks.
Exactly. It really is just another ploy, I think. If it's really truly happening, if there are 4 Republicans who say, okay, let's do this, they are doing it probably to prop up Susan Collins, and then they'll be able to say, well, we were all for having witnesses, but since you won't give us Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, well, you're clearly not operating in good faith, so we don't have to do it.
Yeah, that'd probably be their excuse for that. And it might work. But, well, then you say, all right, well, yesterday you were pretty sure that you were going to be in trouble back at home if we didn't at least hear from John Bolton, and we're not hearing from John Bolton. If you think you can live with that, it's up to you.
It's up to them.
I don't see how, but if you also think that Hunter Biden will help you at home, then find votes. You've got 53. You don't need us. I mean, I guess if the question, though, is there's that one-shot question, witnesses, yes or no. This was your rule. This was your idea. We were going to subpoena everybody individually, but you said no, 53 to 47 every time.
Yep.
So you set yourself up.
Very much so.
Okay.
It's been the ploy all along, and I'm sure a huge part of it is for cover for Susan Collins to say, well, we have to hear all of the evidence. Doesn't it make sense that we hear all of the evidence and then decide if we want more evidence?
It's a good line. I mean, just so long as you don't ask evidence of what?
Yeah.
I mean, there's evidence of all sorts of things. Why don't we have, whatever. We'll do the OJ trial over again in here too. Why don't we hear that evidence? I don't know, because it has nothing to do with this. Yeah, right. Oh, it does have something to do with this. Wow, that's right. I forgot. Okay, well, I guess there's no surprise that the weirdest, dumbest, most controversial trials in our history are going to come back to this one guy, which does remind me that he did make a remark in his presentation that I had forgotten about until just then. But he was trying to say, as part of his you can't impeach without a crime argument, he was saying, they're wanting to impeach the president for abuse of power. Imagine if you could get arrested in this country for abusive behavior. Wouldn't that be? Americans would never accept the idea of arresting people for abusive behavior in this country. And I guess he thought that would make everybody nod in agreement. But it just made me think, well, gee whiz, how did we ever end up with this culture that's so rife with sexual abuse anyway in this country?
Yeah.
And how did this person...
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, right. Imagine being arrested for abusing people in this country. That would be great. I would love to see that start happening. I guess he thought everybody means just treating people abusively, like in line at the supermarket or something like that. That might be problematic. But, well, there are people out there who are abusing people left and right. And what's weird is you keep ending up on their defense teams. That's weird. But even if I give you latitude as a working lawyer to do that, I'm curious why you're always personal friends with them.
That too.
The high priests of sexual abuse in this country are your best friends, and you can't conceive. Imagine if we arrested people for abusing people in this country. It would be arresting all your friends, and maybe you, although you kept your underwear on the whole time. That's what I'm told. But we just want to get to the bottom of this. Maybe Ukraine can help us. And Alan Dershowitz's underwear is back on the record.
You broke me.
Sorry about that. Well, I energized you with the caucus thing. Maybe we can get back in another. I don't know. What else? I'll let you change the subject. How about that? Open mic for, you've been covering a ton of other things. We might as well get that out of your mind.
We've talked about a ton of other things. This morning I wrote about the DCCC announcing its first red to blue slate, okay, which is kind of fun. That means it's an election year. We have the red to blue. At most of the seats that they're targeting, they've actually endorsed individual candidates. Daily Kos has already started a nominee fund for these districts. Okay. Daily Kos generally doesn't endorse a specific candidate until we're through the primaries, unless we're endorsing a candidate in a primary, in the case of Cuellar and Lipinski, where we have picked our nominees that we're raising for.
Okay.
So it's 2020 is the election year. Time to just do this.
All right.
Add to the 43 seats that House Democrats flipped in 2018 and see how many more we can get this time around.
Yeah. Well, it's open it's ripe for the taking, and during the referendum on Donald Trump year, unless we manage to get this removal taken care of, unless we happen to win this case in the next 30 minutes.
The fun part of the story was popped up right in the middle of my writing it, and it was from Jake Sherman at Politico talking about the full-blown fundraising crisis that Republican leadership says it's experiencing.
Yeah.
They were outraised by the DCCC by $40 million in 2019.
Okay.
They're crushing us, said NRCC Chairman Tom Emmer. And Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said they're kicking our ass.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I hope that's true.
So that's enervating.
Yeah, I'm for that. Those guys are known liars, but I hope it's true. There's numbers, so I imagine we could figure that out.
McCarthy has not lied in the past.
Okay. Not them. I mean... the people who said that we were kicking
when
their
he
asses,
said,
McCarthy.
I think there's two people that Putin pays.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's true. He has accidentally told the truth occasionally.
That's an accidental truth.
Okay. So we have that. Lindsey Graham would, not be averse to announcing that, with the idea of being that they would spur more people. Doomsaying is a huge... tool in the toolkit of fundraising.
This was actually, though, in the Republican conference meeting.
Okay. Well,
it's
good.
not out there, trying to... they knew it would leak out. They knew it would get the Kochs and whoever else
all right.
worried and sending them money. But it is a reality that we outraised them by $40 million in 2019.
That is excellent. It may even spark some more retirements. You never know. People come out of that caucus conference meeting saying, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
So, okay, good. Good downer for them. Anybody particularly exciting on the red to blue list?
Wendy Davis.
Wednesday. Yes. Okay. All right. Yes, that is exciting. It's maybe some of that magic still remains, and we all remember now the Texas filibuster effort that she led, although
On behalf of
in a
women.
while, yes.
And I think for a lot of Texas women, that's still going to be, yes,
All right.
enthusiasm building for them. So I have high hopes for that one.
I like it. Okay. Took me a
2018,
second.
we won with women.
Yeah, that's true. So, we try it again.
We try it again.
Turns out there's more women out there. So good.
There are a lot of women out
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah.
And we'll keep it up by all means. Okay, that's an interesting one. I'll take a look, too, at the list. Oh, now I see that, yeah, she's illustrating the piece here, right? So, good call there. All right. That is exciting. Go Texas.
Yeah. Go Texas. And in fact, today is a special election in Texas.
Is it? I had
House
forgotten
District 28, where we have endorsed Elise Markowitz in a special election, getting us one more seat potentially in the House, the State House.
Okay.
In Texas, they picked up 9 seats.
Yeah.
Last time around.
Okay.
We can make it 10 today, possibly. This is where we've seen Beto O'Rourke and Julian Castro and a lot of luminaries, including most of the people running for president among Democrats, endorse. Even Michael Bloomberg went door to door with her, which would have been a really interesting thing to experience.
Yeah, right. And
Bloomberg on your doorstep.
Right. Walking or, being carried by servants or whatever. However he moves from door to door.
So this was kind of a big deal. It's going to be a tough get.
Okay.
We are not being unrealistic and thinking that this is going to be a hard one to flip. But certainly enthusiasm has been on our side. So we'll see.
Specials are weird.
It could be our first win of 2020.
Ah, that would be great. Okay. It's only been a month.
And Daily Kos Elections will be covering that tonight. So make sure to watch that, since you won't be having to watch impeachment probably.
Right. True. Okay.
I don't see McConnell taking them late into tonight after the White House closes. I don't know for sure, but I don't see him doing it.
They could probably use the time to coordinate questions, and we'd be happy to have that rest.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What other subjects
have we got
on?
Hunter's gonna follow up on the Pompeo NPR kerfuffle.
Okay. Yes. The unmarked map ploy, not having worked there. Well, what's next for that?
If you missed it, go look for George Conway's thread on whether Trump could fill in a blank map. It's
no chance.
Highly amusing.
Okay.
And really depressing at the same time.
I can imagine. No chance. I don't think he could do it for the United States.
No.
Much less the rest of the world.
No. He calls Nepal and Bhutan nipple and button.
There is that. Yeah, I had forgotten about that too. And I don't.
And confuses the Baltics and the Balkans.
Right.
To the leaders of the Baltic states' faces.
Right. So
blaming them for the breakup of Yugoslavia.
What did we do now? All right. Well, yeah, I can't imagine that. It looks like it's his pinned thread. Pinned tweet is a thread for those who think Donald Trump couldn't find Ukraine on a marked map. Okay, I'll set that one aside and share that with everybody. But I can only imagine. Is this true?
Depressing.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
this is funny.
Oh, I see what we're talking about here. This is like factual, actual mistakes he's made along the way about geography.
Yes.
Begins with a clip that says from Politico, Donald Trump thinks Belgium is a city. Okay, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Thinks Paris is in
Germany.
Yeah, that's bad too. Also wrong. Yeah, okay. Well,
he wasn't aware that Ireland wasn't part of England.
Wow, because he's kind of an Anglo guy. He's got some German heritage, but he's always talking up his mom's heritage. But okay.
If he had a golf course in Ireland, he might
He does.
understand. He might have gotten that one.
Well, okay, yeah. Well,
But
he
Nipple
does
and Button are my favorite.
Could always put a golf course. Yeah, sure. Well, that's just him and what's on his mind, I think, is possibly. But also he can't see, so he can't read.
That's true.
Won't put the glasses on, doesn't want anybody to see him do that. That causes a lot of problems for him. All right, well, we'll let everybody scroll down that one. And, of course, geography, never been his strong suit. Maybe this explains the Alabama hurricane problem as well. Alabama, that's on the coast, right? I mean, a coast,
I think it
but not
probably
that coast.
does.
You know,
I think you're probably right there.
that could be it. I can't read maps. I don't know where things are relative to, I know it's sort of southeastern. It's got a coastline, but it's the Gulf. But I was thinking the Atlantic coast, so maybe that was all right. Oh, let me see a map.
We'll just magic marker it to the coast.
Right, and I want to find me an early projection that once said that part of it, would affect Alabama, and if there isn't one, then make one. So, governance by Wikipedia editors.
Oh God.
Well, I hadn't thought about that one in a while. But that's a problem for him.
It's very frustrating, Kagro. It's very depressing.
Yes.
That is what's sitting in the Oval Office, and we can't get him impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors when he should have been 25th amendmented out of office in the first 6 months.
Yeah, it's very hard to swallow, and it has forced me to, assess things in terms of, there is a sense in which you could say maybe he's a mad genius. He's the first one to figure out that there's no law or constitution or anything as long as your party holds together. And, that sort of proves the problem that the founders had with political parties and all that. But so what? They're dead, and I have the power. And right now there are people in government who the founders thought were going to jealously guard their prerogatives, who instead are going to vote in lockstep to make me the ultimate power in the universe, like the Death Star. And I don't know why they don't want power that they were elected to wield, but they don't, so I'll take it. And they just say, yeah. So, he's not wrong, so it's hard to say he's a complete moron if you really want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But there are certainly plenty of reasons, plenty of ways to argue. No, he's a moron and wrong, and so are they. True. But he is sitting there as president, and I'm not. So maybe
I did once again. I returned to the what in the hell is Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Republican Senate thinking?
Yeah.
And how McConnell thinks he's building his legacy as an institutionalist as the most powerful man ever to run the Senate when he's destroying the Senate.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess it serves his purpose, and he'll be dead before the history gets written. And I don't know. I get what I want out of this. Eventually, he doesn't have any ideas, the president, so I get to just implant them. So it's a decent deal. I get a salary. Elaine gets a salary. We make a killing in the market because we can change all the regulation. Okay.
That's got to be it. That's got to be it. And I'll have a series of federal courts that will allow me to do all the law breaking I want to when I'm out of office.
I guess so.
Hell, when I'm in office. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I don't know. Or else it's just inertia. I don't know. He's the president. What am I going to do? But I can't imagine that being
it's
the
not
case.
inertia. He's actively working toward helping Trump destroy everything.
Yeah. Well, that's too much benefit of the doubt for him. You're right. Okay, well, it's time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam to document the atrocities, but I appreciate that you were able. It's been a long time since you've been able to be on for so long. This was great.
Yes.
So,
it's been a complicated holiday and impeachment season.
Yes, and cold and flu season as well.
That too.
It always adds to the problem. But I appreciate your sticking with us for all of that, and we'll be on the lookout for your voice over the last day of opening arguments and then into the unknown zone of what exactly comes next. So, and I'll give a look at those rules and see if at least I can read them and help be a resource for everybody else who's more on the ball.
Tweet at me.
Okay.
Tweet at me, whatever you find.
Absolutely. I can totally do that, even if I can't write anymore because I can never find pictures or anything. That's the wrong time for me to have stepped out of the circle of activity at Daily Co's headquarters, but never recovered from that, like screwing up third grade math. Oh well.
I'll help you with it someday.
Excellent. Okay, thanks again, Joan, and we'll look for you on the front pages. Appreciate it, and talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.
All
Bye-bye.
right. And for the rest of us, it'll be Justice Putnam talking at you next. And let's see. I didn't switch over to his summary, but we'll do that. Scan through what we can and see what we can fit in by way of summary after this brief message.
From Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about this? The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has blocked Republican efforts to suppress the vote in battleground states. We've been talking about vote suppression lately. A Virginia Republican lawmaker scolded a colleague for acknowledging that racism still exists. Can't have that. And Republicans in Arizona, Martha McSally, up at the head of that. Back in the news today. Find out why next.